Today I'm going to be showing you how to draw this beautiful lotus. It's a folk art form where you draw the lotus first and then you add a bunch of patterns on it. This is very distinctive of the folk art pattern. Let's take a quick look at all of the materials I will be using for this painting. I've got my cardstock, the drawing paper, eraser and ruler, a cup of clean water, a cup of dirty water, palette, my carbon sheet for tracing. I have a couple of pencils to draw, my dip pens to outline, and two brushes, one small and one big. And I've got my gouache acrylic paints. I've used a 5x7 watercolor paper, which is about postcard size for this painting. For the drawing, the very first thing I did was draw the oval of the lotus, and then I mapped the rest of the leaves from there. You want to clearly place the oval in the correct spot before adding any of these details. To help with that, I've traced this cardstock onto another sheet of paper. That way you can see the exact dimensions of my drawing as it fits on this 5x7 paper. Let's begin. I'm going to be giving you measurements so that you can place your designs exactly the same way as I have. On the long side, on the left hand side, we're going to measure 8.5 centimeters. Let's mark that point. On the other side, the right hand side, we're going to measure 3 centimeters and mark that as well. Now we're going to connect these two dots diagonally, and this diagonal line is where your lotus will sit. You don't have to draw all the way through, it's just a line in the middle. Now let's measure 3.5 on the short side at the top and 2 centimeters on the right hand bottom corner. This will align with another diagonal line that will connect across. This becomes the center of your lotus. Now let's talk about the width or the size of the lotus itself. The lotus is 8 centimeters wide. So make the 4 centimeter mark in the middle of your cross and then mark 4 centimeters on either side. For the height, it's going to be 5. So I'm placing 2.5 in the center. That way I can get 2.5 marked on either side. That'll give me a total height of 5 centimeters. Using these 4 dots, let's start our oval. You want to draw 1/4 at a time. Turn your paper as needed so that you can draw each curve slowly so that it stays balanced. The side petals will measure 11 centimeters in total, so 5.5 on either side of the center. From each end, let's mark a small point just a little below the center line of the oval. Just make sure it matches on both sides. In the center, you're going to connect a curve to this dot. To make sure you have the correct height, mark whatever you have at the top, mark it again at the bottom. So right now I have 1.5, so I'm just marking a 3 at the bottom. So do that on both sides. Now you have all the 4 points you need to connect the curve. Once you've joined these curves, you've got the full lotus shape with elegant side petals. Now let's draw the stem. This is about 0.5 centimeters thick. Make sure it's uniformly thick as you draw the stem. This becomes your center line. I'm going to hold here for a couple of seconds so you can grab all the measurements. Now let's talk about the 2 leaves. For the 2 leaves, leave about 1.5 centimeter space on one side and 0.5 on the other. Mark a small cross where your leaves center is going to be. About 2 centimeters for me on either side, with 1.5 measuring as the thickness of the leaf itself. Instead of the previous measurement, I've actually made this leaf a little bigger with 3 centimeters for the height and 2 for the width from the center. Now using this cross or this plus sign, we are going to draw our leaf. Draw the oval of the leaf and make it as organic as possible. It does not have to be perfect. Let it curve naturally. One side for me is actually slightly thinner and it's wider on the other, and that's fine. This is more realistic this way. Connect the leaf to the stem with the short curve. Now let's do the same thing on the other side. I've got a 5.5 centimeter wide line and I'm going to angle it slightly downwards, marking the center at roughly 1.5 centimeters for the width of the leaf. Now let's draw the oval and we are done on the second side. Let's start with the details of the lotus. Mark the center of your oval. This is about 1.5 centimeters down from the middle. You're going to draw an inner oval, which is the flower's core. You can make it a little bit bigger than your guideline. Let me zoom in on the petals. Okay, starting from the center, draw your first petal. Smooth curve, and then the second one looks like a short S-shape curve. A tiny start and then a big belly. That's the shape of the S curve. Each petal will follow that rhythm, only the length changes. Once you've drawn your lower petals, leave the top open and airy. Let's add another small set of petals right behind the center and then more larger ones at the very end. For the sides, start and stop midway and then gently curve towards the main lotus. Finally, the center of the lotus, we're just going to finish it out with small circles and a few lines radiating outwards for the leaves. Our lotus drawing is done. Before we color, let's trace our drawing onto the cardstock. First, I'm going to cut along the marked edges. I finished cutting my drawing. Now I'm going to place it on top of my cardstock. This is my watercolor paper. I'm going to use some painter's tape to tape this to the table. So don't tape it to the back of the watercolor paper. It might rip the paper off and we don't want that. So just directly tape the drawing to the table. We are taping it so that it just wouldn't move. So this is enough. Flip it up and then place your carbon sheet between them so that they can get sandwiched. The carbon sheet ink side is down. Now use a color pencil to trace your drawing so that you know which lines have already been traced. If you use a regular pencil, you may not know. Since I have used a green pencil to draw, I'm actually going to use a pink pencil to outline so that I can keep track of my lines. Tracing the lotus with a pink color pencil, and because my drawing of the stem and the leaves are in pink already, I'm using a green color pencil to trace. This way I know which lines have already been traced and which lines need to be traced. It's just a visual cue and it helps me while I'm making a trace. The border I've given is about 1/4 inch. So I'm going to be making marks for it, measuring it from the edge. So 1/4 inch on the left side and on the right side, mark it on both sides. And then do the same marking again at the bottom. You need 2 points to draw one straight line. So I'm marking 2 points on both edges. So every edge will have about 2 points. And then go ahead and connect the two you see. So you can see I have the point here and there. I'm just making the straight line connecting those two dots. Same way I'm going to repeat on all 4 sides. Make sure to create the markings on the top and the bottom edge rather than the center. This gives for a perfectly straight line. A little bit of the drawing is cut off by the edge, and that is completely fine. But if you would like a perfectly centered drawing, then make sure to complete your outline first and then trace your drawing. It will not look weird when you finish the painting itself. So it's okay to have missing parts. Let's quickly look at all the colors I will be using for this piece. I'm going to be starting with white and crimson. Instead of crimson, I actually have primary red. It's a regular bright red. On the other hand, if you do have crimson, use it. It has a soft pink tint that I really like. Next, I'll be using yellow ochre and then emerald green. Emerald green is just a regular green, and adding a touch of yellow ochre will lighten it and make it more earthy. And that's what we are going for. Now, the next color is Viridian. It's Viridian Hue, which is a darker green. I will also be mixing a little bit of the yellow ochre to this. Finally, for the shades of blue, I will be using for the background, I'm just going to be using only this blue, and I'll mix white as needed. Before we begin painting, let's start the outline. For this, you can use a very thin brush, a 10x0 liner brush for example, or you can use any kind of fine brush you have. The other option is a dip pen. This is very comfortable to work with and works very beautifully. For the outline color, I'm going to be mixing primary red and white. First, it's 50-50. Add a dollop of red, which is very potent and highly pigmented, so little goes a long way. Then add an equal amount of white. Therefore, we have our 50-50 or 1:1 ratio. We can adjust it later depending upon how bright or light we want the pink. Now adding 2 to 3 drops of water. Mix it gently with your brush, and this has given us a beautiful pink, which is the exact shade I want for my outline. Go ahead and finish the outline with the dip pen or your brush. Before you start with a brush, swirl it along the edge of the palette so it removes any excess paint and keeps your line clean. We are only going to outline the flower with this color, so don't do the outline for the stem or the leaves with this. We will be doing that with green tones later. Outline gently, take your time, have your brush as straight as possible so you can get the thinnest line you can with a brush. If paint is dragging on the paper or if it is moving too fluidly, one or the other is happening. Either you have less water, which is when it'll start dragging, so add a drop or 2. If it is going too smoothly and the paint color is starting to lighten up, that means you have too much water, which means you need to add a little bit more paint. If you're using dip pens, use them the same way. Touch the paint, touch the nib to the paint, take off excess paint at the edge of the palette, and then bring the pen to the paper. You will get the same results, but you will have better control with a pen than a paintbrush. And that's it. The lotus outline is ready in a soft, elegant pink, and we will move on to the next coloring step. For this color mix, we're using the same red as before. I'm just borrowing a little bit from the previous batch and mixing it with more white. About 2 drops of this pink and then a tiny touch of the white. I'm actually using 3 brushes here, one for the white, one for the pink, and one clean dry brush for blending. That way I don't want to keep washing between the steps. So it's simple. First white, add 3/4 of the way, then pink on the top, then blend with your dry brush. If the paints dry out before you've started to blend, it's okay. Add a fresh layer of color on top and then you can blend. These paints are very forgiving, so it's okay if the paint dries out. Use the same pink that we first mixed for the outline and use it with a dip pen for these details. Outline the petal again and then add a couple of streaks that originate from the center point of the petal. The streaks can be different length. Don't try to make it very uniform, that will not look good. For the center of the lotus, we will be using yellow ochre. Mix a little bit of white with yellow ochre. So 1 part yellow ochre with 2 parts white. That is the ratio for the yellow in the center. Once we've mixed this color, first we are going to start with a base layer of plain white. Once you've given the plain white in the center, use this yellow ochre mixture and touch up the edges. And using your blending brush, blend the edge color to the center. This will look like a blooming center where you have white in the middle that slowly transitions into yellow. Now for the dots in the center, you're going to be using pure yellow ochre. No need to mix water or any other color. Just dip your thin brush in the paint and then use it to dot the center design. My recording stopped as I was recording the green leaves, the blue water and the background, including the outline. So I've re-recorded them in smaller bits. So hopefully that will help. Pause the video here so you can capture this finished output and work with this as your reference. Let's create the base color for the leaves. For this, I'm going to be using 1 part emerald green mixed with 1 part yellow ochre. So a 50-50 ratio. Once you've done that, add 2 to 3 drops of water. You want a nice thick creamy consistency, heavy cream consistency. Use this to map out the edges of your stem and your leaves and finish up the base coat for the entire leaves and stem. While the base coat for the leaves are drying, let's work on the base coat for the water. The water is going to be mixed up with primary blue, 1 part, and 1 part of white. Mix it up with a couple of drops of water for the same thick, creamy consistency. You need a larger dollop because you have more area to cover, so make sure you have enough paint to cover when you're mixing it the first time itself. Use a small brush to outline the leaves and the flower and use a larger brush for filling in the rest of the background. You need the correct size brush for the appropriate task. So usually for lines and thin markings, use a smaller brush. When you're covering a larger area, understand the size of the area and use the correct size of brush. Sometimes you can use even a flat brush as opposed to a round brush to cover these larger background areas. Dip your brush in the paint, and if you've taken excess paint, then dab it on another part of the canvas before taking it to the outline. The outline has to be thin and smooth, and then you can spread it out if you have any dollops of paint sitting around it. The best possible way is to dip the brush and then take out the excess in the palette itself. So dab the sides so you take out any excess paint, and now you can draw the thinner outlines. For the patterns on the green leaves and the stem, I'm going to be adding a little bit of viridian green hue. It's a single dollop of this dark green color and another dollop of yellow ochre. So 1:1 ratio for these two colors. So you can see I've got 1 dollop of green and 1 dollop of the yellow ochre, adding 2 to 3 drops of water. We want a slightly thinner consistency than heavy cream so we can draw the lines and patterns. So don't make it very thick so that the paint is dragging on the paper. You want a thinner consistency, slightly thinner than cream and thicker than tea. All right. Once you've got the correct consistency, take your thinnest brush or even use a pen, the dip pen, to create these lines. This is just going to be line work. So I'm outlining my stem and then I will be drawing the pattern on my leaf itself. This is the same color paint that I will be using to create a border for the entire painting. So make sure you have enough paint to cover all of these details. For the stem design, it is 3 lines across and 2 lines sideways. So that is all I've done, and this has been alternated to create the entire stem work itself. Once the stem is done, I'm using the same green to outline my entire painting. This outline goes between the blue and the gold border so that you can actually see the line work. Once the line work is done, it's time to create the gold. For the gold, you need a base color of yellow ochre. I've mixed 1 drop of yellow ochre with 1 drop of water. So 1:1 ratio. You want the yellow ochre creamy enough to cover the border area. So just go ahead and apply the yellow ochre as a base coat for the metallic gold. Metallic colors are transparent, so therefore you need a base color. You will not be able to paint the metallic color directly on top of a white paper. Now that the borders are done and the leaves over, let's work on the pattern for the blue water. The color mix for this is 1 drop of the same blue to 3 drops of white. So 1:3 ratio with again 4 to 5 drops of water because we want a slightly thinner consistency than heavy cream. So we can actually draw out the patterns. This can be done using a thin brush or even the dip pens. I am just using a thin brush. Make sure that the consistency is thin enough you're able to draw lines like this, and then you can continue working directly on the canvas after that. This is the color that it looks like, really pastely blue. You add a dot and add 2 curves over it. So a dot and 2 curves over it, and that is the overall pattern for the entire painting. I finished a portion of the blue patterns. I want to quickly show you the metallic gold that I have. I'm using a regular gouache metallic gold and I am mixing it with a little touch of water. Gouache paints, when they dry up, can be reactivated with water. It is for regular gouache that this reactivation happens, not for acrylic gouache. So the Liquitex acrylic gouache, once it's dry, that's it. You can't use it again. Other gouache companies are available, which is where my gold is from, which is the reason I'm mentioning all of these details. My gold I'm activating with a little bit of water and then I am just painting it. Let's continue with the blue pattern now that I've shown you how to do the metallic gold. The painting is done and I'm happy to have worked on this with you. I hope to see you on another painting.